Now back with you on this video. I'm going to be talking about episode 4 of Sunny, the Apple TV show. So the episode is called Sticky. Full spoilers from the start of this review as always. Not so much to talk about this episode. There are certain developments, but this is my least favourite episode by quite a bit, I would say, because for the first time out of the 4, really, this one really did plod along. There wasn't really enough sort of engrossing me or propelling me forward. Even the character stuff wasn't that good in this one, because the previous 3 episodes, the character stuff had been driving it and some of the ideas, and that stuff was fun and has kept me engrossed. There's still some fun stuff in this one, but it wasn't as much, and it did get to a point in this episode where it got to, well, not really the finale, but what felt like a big part of the episode, which was Mitzi, Sunny, and also Susie getting to these baths, these public baths, and the conversation they overhear at these public baths. And it's a whole thing. And that scene just dragged on and didn't really seem that interesting overall. Didn't really seem like we found out that much. It just felt like, okay, this is a little bit more of the shenanigans of whoever's running this thing, this underworld sort of club. And it just didn't really seem to give you that much. And I just felt, as I said, it dragged on and it just wasn't a very interesting scene. It just wasn't very compelling to watch. There were a couple of kind of cliches about underworld gangs and what have you, and it just didn't really do it for me. But let's see how we got to that, because we of course start at the funeral, Master's funeral, which is still going on. So the big thing at the end of last week was then Susie managed to put together that this woman has some sort of ties to what's going on with her supposedly dead husband, and that's to do with the whole robot fighting stuff. She had that flashback from the past. So she starts questioning her mother-in-law, who that woman is, and we can see that the mother-in-law is getting on the defensive a bit, trying to stall her, trying to make excuses. And then another guy comes into the picture, so another one of the guests at the funeral, and he starts talking in a weird way about Masa's dad, because we find out then in the past Masa's told Susie then the whole reason he moved was because his father had passed away, but this person is talking like the father is still very much alive and at the picture. So that then brings up the question, if he's still alive, why is he not at his own son's funeral? And it turns out, which we find out in little drips and drabs in this episode, then Master's father is someone different, someone other than who Susie thought he was, and that this guy appears to still be alive. And because of some of the information we find out in this episode, it seems like he might have some ties to what's been going on with all these shady, like, underworld people and what have you. So she slowly finds out, it's like, yeah, why is he not at his own son's funeral? The mother-in-law gives quite a convoluted story about his cousin and like this incident in the past with an injury, and it all just leads to what we find out by the end of the episode. Then Master's father was someone else. So this is like the last straw for Susie. Mitzi shows up at the funeral randomly, so it seems like she still has an interest, and I'm down with that because I do like the dynamic between her and Susie, as I said. And I do think the 3 of them, like Sunny, Susie and Mitzi, they do make quite a fun little trio, like quite a heist sort of team. So Mitzi wants them to steal some booze. It's kind of one of those things where let's just get drunk. Screw it. Let's get drunk and leave this place and crash. And once again, it gets a bit into Sunny's like limitations when it comes to the program, because there's this little loophole where she can't actually steal the booze because it's not owned by Susie, so she can only like take the booze if it's by her owner. And it's just a little gag from Mitzi. It's like, unfortunately humans don't have that function, so yeah, she steals the booze, they go off and get drunk. And I like how there's a callback to it later when Sonny takes a little pop at Mitzi. It's like, hey, well, Mitzi likes to steal things, why not ask her to do this? And so that is one of the sides of Sunny that I enjoy. Then she's constantly becoming more sarcastic and human, and there's some fun banter between these characters. So what the episode builds to is, there's a scene which probably could have been cut out, to be fair, because it just amounts to what we find out later on. But at one point, Susie is talking to someone in the insurance field, and she learns that her husband took out this policy just days before his plane crashed. So that's a little bit suspicious, and there's ties to the new information she's getting about his father. So she's suspicious about that. But they end up at these public baths. And this scene is really random because it seems like she's literally just going there for like a bath. Like, she's just going there to like chill out, have a bath. And then it just leads to something else very randomly. It's not like she goes looking for this information, but like, she goes to have a public bath, and the guy at the front desk says, sorry, the women's baths have been closed for like a past hour. And Susie sort of calls out the sexism. Well, why just the women's side? Why not the men's? But it turns out there is probably a reason, because it seems like these baths are run by the people who are behind this. And Susie is being followed by this spy who's been dispatched by the woman who's like heading up the thing, who we've seen at the funeral. So they're being followed. I think this is one of the problems with the episode, is it does cut about a bit too much, so there's not as much focus this time. But they manage to get into the public baths because once again they use Sunny to like cause a distraction. So Susie and Mitzi get inside, and they end up overhearing this conversation because they're in the female side, and a group who are like obviously like gangsters, part of the underworld, they come in on the male side, and they just overhear this suspicious conversation. And it's one of these scenes that's a bit comedy, a bit more tense, because Mitzi and Susie are obviously both drunk, and there's times when they're trying to be quiet as they listen into this like seedy conversation. And eventually what it builds to is someone else comes in who's like quite a big shot, and he finds out that one of the other guys who's in this bath is like, well, you're meant to be on my side, and you're having a liaison with like the enemy. And it just leads to him brutally killing him. It's quite a full-on scene. And again, Mitzi and Susie are trying to hold their breath and not give away they're there. And you see the guy's head like splattered on like the window in front of them. It's pretty full-on. Now, at the same time as this is happening, Sunny has, not unbeknownst to them, has gone back to the living space, well, where the funeral was. And she's gets the mother-in-law drunk, and that's a way to try and dig around and confirm that, yeah, Master's dad was someone else. So she gets the mother-in-law drunk, she gets these files proved, and it's a thing. So we kind of see Sunny's use in that scene as well, but it's just a bit convoluted in the way they're jumping around. And as I said, the bath scene for me just dragged on and was a little bit dull. We didn't get that much information in the end, and it just leads to the end of the episode where Susie comes back and finds her place ramshackled, and we find out that the crooks have turned it up inside out, and they're stolen things. They're looking for information now, and that's kind of how we end, with Susie having a little bit of a breakdown, and Mitzi and Sunny are telling her we've got to go, And it's almost like this stuff has finally hit her fully. Like in the previous episodes, it feels like Susie has had problems digesting this and processing what's going on. And finally, just having her like apartment and files and everything ramshackled has finally just hit a nerve on her, and she's like broken down. And again, Rashida Jones is doing some great acting in this show, so it's not really on her. It's just this episode, as I said. It did drag. Some of the big scenes weren't that interesting for me. So it was definitely the weakest episode so far. But that's Sunny episode 4. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out. You can also support me for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/borednow. But I'll be back with more soon. Thanks guys. Goodbye.